Madam Speaker, may I first of all thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and SODELPA Leader for giving me this opportunity this morning to address the House on the 2015 budget. As the Opposition spokesman on finance, while being the leader of the Election Regulation Party. I thank the Honourable Minister of Finance for the budget address, and I also thank all the senior civil servants for their hard work and input into the budget. It is of some relief that our national budget can finally undergo some semblance of public scrutiny after 8 years of military dictatorship. We remain hopeful that the establishment of parliamentary democracy will bring about confidence, and we do expect investors to expand the scope of the investment so that Fiji can realize better growth in the future. However, this confidence can erode quickly if we are not able to bring about media freedom, removal of fear, removal of some of the draconian decrees, and overbearing micromanagement of the economy. Madam Speaker, before I move on, I must record the opposition's dismay at the lack of respect shown to members of Parliament and indeed taxpayers who put this cost by the Minister of Finance in not making his budget speech and budget estimates available to Parliament on time. Many of us did not receive the budget estimate until 22nd of November, and the budget speech came 6 days later on 27th of November, which is a clear departure from the rules set out in the standing orders and the Constitution. I don't think this has ever happened in the history of Fiji. Of course, this allows the Minister of Finance to get undisputed praise for all the positive aspects he talked at length about, without the opposition members and the public being able to criticize his weakness. Only yesterday, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance once again tried his excellent salesman skills by telling us that the supplement to the budget estimate was in fact the official budget document. Nothing can be further from the truth. During his maiden speech, he displayed his lack of mathematics knowledge. And yesterday in Parliament, the Minister showed his lack of understanding of vocabulary. The document that he referred to yesterday was the supplement. Supplement
Please refrain from attacking individuals.
Means completing or enhancing something, just like vitamin supplements or supplementary questions that have been asked in this Parliament. This supplement to the estimate contains details of programs. The estimate, Madam Speaker, is this, which lays down the estimates for the appropriation bill. This is the official budget document, and it says, as presented to Parliament. It outlines the appropriation bill from head 1 to head 52. This Parliament, like our predecessors, will have to scrutinize each individual head and program in the Committee of Supply as stipulated in the standing orders. Even the publication of the supplement is not a normal practice but a waste of taxpayers' funds. This document, Madam Speaker, the 2014 budget estimates, is the complete document which was presented last year. It contains the full estimates of individual heads and programs. This long-standing budgetary practice was adopted by its predecessor and Prime Minister as well as other former finance ministers. Therefore, it is grossly misleading that the 2015 estimate said in bold print as presented to Parliament, because it never was, and this is a breach of the 2013 Constitution and the standing orders, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is great room for improvement by this government to display magnanimity after winning the election. Unfortunately, it continues with its egoistic, know-it-all, dictatorial, and vindictive attitude and has presented a budget which in the medium to long term is going to make our future even bleaker. It is a budget which is going to increase the gap between rich and poor. It is a budget that is going to increase income inequality. Continuing with previous tax policies, such as the increase in VAT and reductions in income and corporate tax, brought in by previous budgets. Honorable Minister, I like to well to listen. Above all, it is a budget which is unrealistic and unsustainable in the medium term based on likely recurrent revenues. As I said in my maiden speech, Madam Speaker, Fiji today is a work in progress, and my hope was that this budget was going to give the country a vigorous impetus to turn back the negativism that we have seen in the last several years and build the Fiji of tomorrow despite the uncertain and somewhat unpredictable global environment. In the first part of my response, I will deviate from the norm of just looking at the allocation on which a lot of time was spent in the budget speech, and that is why I call it economically boring budget. A budget of $3.3 billion comprising water subsidies, electricity subsidies, subsidies on medicine, free education, bus fare to all students are all positive features. And they have been continued from last year, and we welcome this. But these alone cannot be the only thing one can talk about in a reply to a national budget. Madam Speaker, a national budget is a central political process. It is not only a process which lays down the expenditure and income of the government, but provides a platform for a longer-term vision of our country, political credibility, and confidence for the future. It is about achieving resilience in the face of adverse conditions and improving Fiji's fiscal position so that we are not caught in the headlights of global capital market concerns with high and rising debt. The budget is about mobilizing people's creative energies to collectively move the nation forward. It is essentially about building trust in the economy. There are elements in this budget that can be measured quantitatively. They are important, but they are not everything. Issues such as vision, leadership, governance, genuine democracy, and a quality of life of people on a sustained basis are equally important. A budget is an opportunity to sow the seeds of inclusivity by reaching out to all the people with sustainable economic and social policies. In the last 80 years, Madam Speaker, we have seen a rapid breakdown of state institutions and the ineffectiveness of them to work for the benefit of the people. Minister after minister admitted in their maiden speeches that not all has been good in their ministries these last 8 years, during which the main Brahma government has had total control without having to account the taxpayers of Fiji. For example, the Minister for Health laid down a number of problems in the health sector, and he was honest about it. Lack of doctors, lack of nurses, equipment, lack of timely services to LATs, lack of nursing hospitals, and so on. The Minister for Education, has already started implementing reforms and I think his ministry has pointed out things like the lack of commitment from teachers and an inadequate curriculum. He has already announced the reintroduction of exams which are abolished by the previous government and the Minister for Education, as well as other major changes. Others also pointed out problems in the various ministries. It is a clear admission that the interim government had lost its way in many areas. It is a clear demonstration of the failure of government, reform and policy. You have 2 hours, Honorable Minister, to deliver address.
Reform
and policy over the last 8 years.
Excuse me. just ask honorable members, please allow us to hear what the Honorable Prasad is saying, and just tone down a little with your interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. They need to learn to listen as well. Esteemed Madam Speaker, allow me to remind the Minister of Finance of the famous words of Albert Einstein. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. At the heart of our country's problem in the last 27 years, and indeed exacerbated in the last 8 years, has been the lack of good leadership and appalling standards of governance at virtually all levels. The unleashing of bad governance, lack of accountability, and transparency after all the tools has become a norm. Good governance is not merely a cliche and catchphrase. The principles of it are logical, equitable, transparent, and of critical importance for the progress and prosperity of our beloved nation. Government has talked about the civil service reform, and that is welcome. However, the civil service deterioration and militarization has been presided over the by the interim government. Public service must always remain an independent and impartial implementer of government policies. The government of the day makes policies and the civil service implements it. The role of the public sector and the Public Service Commission has been destroyed. The decision to give permanent secretaries powers for the recruitment, promotion, etc. is a regressive step. The government must revert back to old principles, and robust and consistent Public Service Commission should be given the responsibility to manage the public service in the public interest. Government has talked about the civil service reform, and that is welcome. But reforms must empower public servants to undertake decisions regarding implementing policies made by government. What we have today is a civil service that is besieged, that is demoralized and fearful. Many senior civil servants are terrorized and insecure about the jobs they should and if they disagree with their masters and are unwilling to make decisions or are simply not allowed to make decisions. The reform must therefore put in processes and policies where civil servants can take ownership of implementing and enforcing policies in an independent and impartial way. There can be no room for an overlord mentality. Madam Speaker, let me say a bit more on governance at the executive level. The Cabinet, the imposed Constitution, clearly mandates the Attorney General as the chief legal advisor to the government. That is why in most parliamentary democracies, the Attorney General comes from outside, the elected members, but when they come from the elected members, they hold their portfolio. What we have in Fiji today is that the Attorney General will end up advising himself and making the decisions himself. Listen, Honorable Minister. Attorney General will end up advising himself, making the decision himself as Minister responsible for finance. Statistics. This is more about the budget. Public enterprise, public service, information, civil aviation, parliament, elections. Why are also there? Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General is also the General Secretary of the Fiji First Party.
With all this.
That's right, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if anyone wants to see and understand the paradox of good governance, they should study Fiji now. There is more than one PhD thesis possible. Why might do another PhD thesis? Continuing on the paradox of good governance coming. We have a litany of examples of nepotism in appointments in the civil service, statutory organizations, appointments of boards and the chairman. The government worryingly continues to hold executive chairmanship of a number of key organizations. Madam Speaker, please, may I repeat what I said in my maiden speech in October. The continuation of regressive and draconian decrees will render meaningless all talk of Fiji once again being a genuinely democratic nation. The Media Industry Development Authority decree, the Essential Employment National Industries decree, the political parties decree must be repealed by Parliament because they curtail the rights of the media, ordinary workers, trade unions, and ultimately our people. More specifically, in a real democracy, people have the liberty to speak openly and candidly. The government of the day listens and the media exercises its role as the messenger and watchdog of democracy. And as an independent institution, responsibly accepts the right to speak, criticize, and agree without fear or favor, and not eliminating the voice of Parliament or the executive government.
Point of order. Order 61. If the honourable member could please limit his expressions to the subject, which is the budget.
Point of order. Please focus on the budget. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, budget is as much as figures, it is as much as about governance as well. Good governance. Continuing with the theme of governance, the public release of the Auditor General's report for the last 7 years are indicative of the severe erosion of good governance and common decency by the government and ministers. What is only beginning to...
Madam Speaker, again I want to remind the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee and all members in that committee is a quasi-judicial body. You do not prejudge matters until you've gone through the hearing. The Public Accounts Committee is going to go through the Auditor General's report. It then arrives at the conclusion after hearing and calling people as it can summon people before the committee. Then it arrives at the conclusion, presents a report to Parliament. The chairman again, as indicated through the media, is now prejudging the matter. What sort of chairman is he?
Thank you. Thank you. I'll now give the floor back to Hon Prasad. Please consider the issues that have been raised.
Madam Speaker, let me respond to the usual sidetrack by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Attorney General. Never in my public utterances have I cast any aspersion or made reference to the content of the report. Madam Speaker, the fight against corruption is an important element of good governance. The setting up of FiGov is an important development, but FiGov must be allowed to operate independently and must not be used by government to intimidate and harass its opponents. On a score of about 4 out of 10, Fiji was ranked 55 out of 159 countries in 2005, and we don't have the scores for the last several years. Fiji also had below average integrity ratings as measured by the Annual Corruption Perception Index. This means that most people think that corruption level in Fiji is very, very high. Let me now come to the budget. We are looking for a budget, for a vision in this budget. Something to spark the imagination of the people. A clear vision of a worthwhile future that stretches beyond what we have in this country today. This budget and this government has gone into what we would call a brain glitch, because they cannot truly see the basis of the future of this country. They talk about mandate. Yes, they have the mandate of 59% of the voters in this country. But when governments, after winning, begin to talk about mandate, you know they have simply lost the plot and have no original ideas. We can understand what might happen in the last 8 years. We are not even going there. There is this strange view that business as usual in governance would be good. Some supporters in the media parrot the view that if we talk about following Singapore's model, Fiji could become like Singapore. What utter nonsense and shallow journalism. Singapore's context is totally different, and there is no relevance to its comparison to Fiji's circumstances. If there is any country, Madam Speaker, we should try and compare and emulate, it is Mauritius. If we have to learn anything on good governance, we should learn from Mauritius. A country with a genuine democracy, a country with a good sugar industry, a nation that welcomes millions of tourists, which attracts large foreign investments, a country which has free education from preschool to the university, free medical for every citizen including heart surgery, a country which has an unregulated media and where the media freedom is not under threat from draconian decrees, a country where trade unions flourish and defend workers' rights, a country where an electoral system rules under which free and fair elections are conducted, a country which had an average growth rate of more than 5% for more than 30 years. The heart of Mauritius' economic and social success is good governance and genuine democracy, and the absence of a powerful military that does coups every few years and retards the country by decades every time it does so. Unfortunately, the government seems to have looked at a clear example from Mauritius, and that is to follow the model of government acquiring fuel in bulk and supplying it to private companies. This is a bad decision. You copied a bad one. This is a bad decision. Which specifically tells you that taxpayers are absent. With an initial investment of 250,000 is to be made, and that will for sure, and we will all be witness to this come next year. Suggest a more taxing burden of even more public funds in such a huge, volatile and investment-intensive sector. This is yet another example of government trying to meddle in the economy unnecessarily. What we can already envisage happening is that it will eventually lead to increase in fuel prices, and it will be very difficult to control it. It will be open to abuse and control and manipulation by a few. Energy security is central to the economy of any nation, and any central control over supply of it should always be treated with great caution. We suggest that if the government's sole objective is to stabilize fuel prices, then there is a better way of doing it. The government should set up a stabilization fund through a levy which can be used to do that. This will avoid the setup of another state venture and the yet unknown flow on associated costs. It's a contradiction in government's policy. This budget, Madam Speaker, lacks clarity in direction and depth. There does not seem to be a coherent link between vision and action and between strategy and objectives. There is confusion and inconsistency between the economic policies and some ill-devised populist policies. We are talking here, Madam Speaker, about a budget of a nation and not a company. As stated by a Nobel laureate in economics, Paul Krugman, a company is not a company. This means that a national budget must be based on some general principles and not some specific strategies that are normally used by private companies. For example, responsible governments do not make tax policies targeted at certain individuals or companies, offer tax breaks to some and not others, duty concessions to some and not to others. There have been several cases in the last 8 years, and I see that being continued. The only difference this time around is that there will be vigilant oversight from the opposition. Reforms and cost of doing business. For the last 8 years, government claimed that the reforms have improved the business environment in the country. However, the IMF in its recent report says that deeper and more rapid structural reform is needed to lift Fiji's potential growth and reduce external vulnerabilities and reduce poverty. The report further states, and I quote, priority should be given to improving the investment climate by streamlining government regulations, relaxing price controls, while protecting the most vulnerable and further enhancing of the use of land and upgrading infrastructure also. The last World Bank ranking on ease of doing business puts Fiji last among the top 81 countries. We have actually dropped 8 points from the previous rank of 73. Fiji's ranking dropped in 9 of the 10 categories. 9 of the 10 categories, Madam Speaker, which the World Bank uses to rank countries such as starting a business, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, registering property, getting credit, protecting minority investors, paying taxes, trading across borders, and resolving insolvency. Fiji's ranking on starting a business highlights a number of procedures for starting a business and the number of days to register a business have all increased in 2013 compared to 2012. This suggests that compared to other economies, bottlenecks of starting a business have increased in Fiji. The aggregate ranking on the ease of doing business for Fiji in 2003 was 60 out of 185. In 2014, Fiji's ranking, as I said earlier, went down to 73. In terms of starting a business, we ranked 160 out of 189. Investments cannot be expected to thrive in Fiji under these conditions. Madam Speaker, we can only improve our business environment and the cost of doing business if government stops micromanaging the economy. It has its hand in every aspect of the economy and has created unnecessary bottlenecks at all levels. Those responsible for facilitating business are in a state of paralysis. At one time in India, they used to describe these conditions as Inspector Raj. In Fiji, we have ended up with a decree Raj. From Inspector Raj to a decree Raj, and some might say the Attorney General's Raj. Government really has no business being in business, and neither is that what they are being paid to do. On economic growth, Madam Speaker, one of the strangest aspects of this government's ideas is that there's been business as usual, without a single major initiative to create new industries with good incomes. There are two areas which we as economists have always been advocating for more than a decade, which are the coal sectors, data processing industries, which require cheap telecommunication charges, which we have failed to deliver, and the retirement homes industry, which requires specialist medical services for the elderly, which currently Fiji lacks. And there are some good moves in the latter direction with FMU initiatives, and I welcome that in my maiden speech, Madam Speaker. But we've been hearing this since 1999, when Apollo hospitals first approached Fiji, and little has been done since. On the retirement homes front, Madam Speaker, this government has already put a spanner in the works by banning the sale of freehold residential land to foreigners, which will actively discourage many overseas retirees to Fiji and the employment and capital they have been bringing to Fiji. This government has continued to claim unprecedented growth, and they have claimed credit for it. It appears that the word unprecedented has been misused in an unprecedented manner. Government claims a lot of credit for recovery in the economy, and they make it sound as if this is the only government which has done something to achieve high growth rates. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, Fiji, in the first decade of independence, grew at an average of more than 5%. And if we did not have a coup in 1987, if we did not have another one in 2000, we would have grown at an average growth rate of more than 5% for the last 80 years. That would have been an unprecedented achievement. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, let us be clear where this moderate growth over the last 2 years is coming from. Is it coming from the private sector? Is it inclusive? Has it created many jobs? Is it coming from our local businesses? Big, medium, small? Madam Speaker, much of the growth between 2012 and 2014 has been borrowed growth and public sector investment with very little private sector commitment. The Biman Prasad government has freely borrowed from FNPF, whose board it totally controls, and even increased our borrowings from abroad, thereby increasing our overseas expenditure. The only thing unprecedented and historical about these past 8 years, apart from the propaganda and hype from government ministers, is the increased bondage of debt our people have been placed under, and sweetened only by the meager freebies that are not really free, but paid for by themselves, and debt in particular whose burden falls on the poor and middle classes. Never in the history of this country have we seen such unprecedented expansionary policies based on borrowing. The Honorable Prime Minister keeps talking about the NPF saga, and he's right in saying that we should not repeat it. The 220 million lost from the NPF saga indeed was a big hole in the nation's coffers, and had to be paid by increased public debt, financed by the 253 million sale of government ownership in APH shares. But Madam Speaker, the massive infrastructure spending last year and the allocation of 630 million for next year, more than 630 million for next year, funded through borrowing and planned asset sales of more than 500 million, would leave the biggest dent yet in our budget, and it is our people who will be shackled by the burden of debt. This is unprecedented. Also unprecedented, Madam Speaker, and bigger than the NPF disaster, is the massive losses made by the Biman control boards of FNPF, investments in Natandola and Momi, where more than 350 million have already been written down, and more will be written down in the future. And this government experiments with building 5-star resorts, which function should be left to our tourism industry and the private sector. It will be interesting, if not painful for taxpayers, to see if this government will lose more of their money in the investments and Momi. Revenue and expenditure policy. Madam Speaker, if we analyze the revenue and expenditure policy between 2009 and 2013, we find that government has increasingly relied on indirect taxes, which the people don't know that they have to pay. That is why it's easier for governments to always go for indirect taxes. In 2011, government increased VAT to 15%. VAT is a regressive tax, and the burden of this tax falls more heavily on the poor. In addition, from 2010, government also increased fees, fines and charges, which are again a huge burden on the everyday person in this country. In 2013, the capital budget was underspent by 140 million, and similar patterns are to be found in 2014, and we expect that in 2015 as well. I expect that in 2015, the 653 million allocated to Fiji Road Authority will not be spent. And if it is spent, it will be spent in a hurry at the end of the year. Just as it was done this year, with much wastage, inflating expenditure. Honorable Member, why not look at the meaning of assumption in the dictionary? Inflating expenditure and not doing it has been the strategy used by this government to take the people for a ride. This budget priority for the second year running must ensure that the bulk of these funds remain in Fiji and the money is used for the purpose that it was intended. We will vigilantly monitor from this side of the House to see that and offer advice to the Honourable Minister when it's necessary. In 2014, for example, about 400 million from asset sales has not been realized. But the government still claims that its deficit will be only 2% of GDP. How did they arrive at this? The only conclusion we can draw is that they have not spent what they told the people in the budget. Most funds are under acquisition, and government has used them to withhold expenditure and probably use them to manage its cash flow. For example, the 10 million for first home buyers in 2014 has not been used by many people. And I'm aware that just prior to elections there were some very showy newspaper advertisements, but there was never an intention to actually spend that money. Government debt position. Government has increased government debt has increased by about $1.136 billion between 2006 and 2014. This represents a 39% increase over the 8-year period. Debt as a percent of GDP has fluctuated between 48 to 53% during the same 8-year period. There was a sharp increase in deficit as compared to previous years in 2009. This increase also reflects the fact that the government moved away from a position of fiscal consolidation adopted in 2007 and 2008. Government guarantees and contingent liabilities are fiscal obligations contingent on the occurrence of particular events. These obligations are not budgeted and accounted for or considered in conventional fiscal analysis. However, we have a complete scenario in the fiscal position. Government obligations outside the budgetary system should be considered as well. Madam Speaker, between 2006 and 2012, guarantees and contingent liabilities have increased by $748 million, or 56%. In 2012, it stood at 28.8% of GDP. Therefore, one can add 50.9% of debt to GDP and 28.8% of guarantees and contingent liabilities to GDP, and argue that it stands at 79.7% of GDP. Although the debt without contingent liabilities should not raise immediate concerns, the government should outline a debt policy for sound and effective management of public debt to a sustainable debt position in the medium to long term. There is another serious question to the government's contention that the deficit for 2014 is 1.9% of GDP. If we exclude the revenue from the sale of government assets, the budget deficit would be 7.8% of GDP. Is the government deliberately using the old government financial statistics, GFS, standards instead of new financial statistics? This is a pertinent question because if the government had used the new government financial statistics of 2001, then the sale of government assets would not have been treated as revenue, and the budget deficit would be a 7.8% of GDP in 2014, not the 2% that they are boasting about. Madam Speaker, another notable trend is the steady increase in overseas borrowings, which was not the case before. Repayments for these borrowings would have to be in foreign exchange. The global bonds of USD 150 million was a standby facility at 6% interest rate under the SDL government. The interim government used it. When it was time to pay, they went and borrowed an additional USD 250 million, which amounts to 452 million Fijian dollars, at an interest rate of 9%, when there were clearly options for it to borrow at a lower interest. This bond is due in 2016. By 2016, government would have paid 207 million in interest alone. This is 207 million that would have gone a long way towards state services, building homes, education and health, or welfare payments. The continued overseas borrowing will require additional foreign exchange earnings. In addition, the government must top up the sinking funds, which stood at about 182 million at the end of 2013, because the sinking fund is what enables Fiji to ensure that it is able to meet its debt repayment. Madam Speaker, the long and short of this is that the people of this country are and will continue to pay for it. Based on 2013 figures, each man, each woman, each child had a debt burden of about $4,440. A child born today automatically inherits a debt of $4,440 before they have even opened their eyes, grown their first tooth, or taken their first steps. Each household would have a debt burden of more than 20,000. Every family buy a $20,000 car or invest $20,000 in a house because they presently and against their will go and be indirectly paying off $20,000 towards the servicing of these loans. They are already paying for it from these prices who are held services because large amounts of funds are going towards paying our debt, including interest payments. There's never been a time when the need for sound financial management has been more critical. We should set clear targets on debt and concise clear targets for borrowings. How do we spend public funds? Is it spending another $12 million on hosting an international golf tournament next year? The best use of public funds? Well, it could be used to build 600 homes for our people in the smaller settlements. I take this opportunity to suggest to the government to conduct cost-benefit analysis of major spending to provide a clear thinking to the taxpayers regarding the worth of how the funds are spent. Trade policy, Madam Speaker. An import duty of 32% placed to all importers, bar one, which gets a zero duty to import cream milk and sell them to consumers at a price which many are not able to afford, makes the argument by government to protect the local dairy industry pretty shallow and whole. This favored company, which has got zero duty, has no incentive to promote the local industry, when it can continue to rake in millions of dollars by simply importing. This too is at the expense of the ordinary consumers who are paying very high prices of milk and milk products. On one hand, when the government is giving millions of dollars to one private company, it is trying to provide milk to class 1 students, thereby putting more profits in the pockets of the same company. The simpler and more sustainable policy for government would have been to reduce the duty on cream and milk. This would allow every child and every family to afford milk in this country. The gimmicky nature of this policy by the Minister of Finance is easily seen when you ask, if taxpayers are going to provide milk to class 1 students, why not to preschool students who probably need milk more? What about class 2 students? Every child needs Indeed, I would like to ask the Minister of Finance if you consulted the Fiji Food and Nutrition Center whether this was the best way to tackle malnutrition amongst our children throughout the length and breadth of Fiji. Madam Speaker, there are some ridiculous, discretionary tariff policies adopted by this government, quite at odds with our commitments to WTO claims. We urge the government to immediately review this policy. If it wants to help the dairy industry, we would suggest that it should be to direct support to the farmers in improving their pastures, building infrastructure, and close extension and primary support to the farmers. I see the honorable member who is a farmer might agree with me. When we talk about trade policy, we are not only talking about export policies and strategies. Good trade policy puts emphasis on good import policies as well. Protecting one company to promote local dairy industry, Honorable Minister, by assisting the imports will be a colossal failure. Import substitution policy is an age-old policy which has failed elsewhere. It has previously failed in Fiji, and there is no doubt that it will fail in this case. The losers would be ordinary consumers and dairy farmers in this country, Madam Speaker. The same kind of what I call cronism and favoritism in trade policy continues in this budget. It is an immature and irresponsible decision to raise duty to 32% on printing and photocopying papers and exercise books. It is preposterous to put a special rate of $1 or 32%, whichever is greater on exercise books. A 200-page exercise book costing $1.70 now will cost $2.70 as a result of the increase. What good then is free meal, education and bus fare when any savings will be diverted towards buying exercise books, paying higher prices for paper, and for all the children at all levels, primary, secondary, including those in tertiary education. Another example, Madam Speaker, another example of lack of economic logic is the duty of $5 on black DVD, supposedly to help protect against piracy. Again, this is to protect one company. But this is simply an admission of the total failure you find out. And video outlets would sell pirated products. Again, Madam Speaker, seriously, what is the rationale for this action? Who is this government trying to help at the expense of consumers? It is critically important for the Fijian government to continue with the trade liberalization that it began in the 1980s. A reversal of trade policy in this area will not provide support for broad-based economic growth. Fiji's experience from the past suggests that it cannot go back to an inward-oriented strategy by providing protection to domestic firms in order to encourage production and employment. The potato example is strongly relevant in the case against an inward-oriented strategy such as the import substitution policy. Despite the subsidy from the government to encourage farming, the industry has failed to take off. Just these few days we hear that the Ministry of Agriculture were importing seed potatoes from New Zealand, a temperate country, when we should have been importing probably the red Pontiac variety from tropical Australia. Goodness. Did our decision makers in the Ministry of Agriculture not know this simple, basic geographical fact? Or they were simply experimenting on our farmers. Trade restrictions, Madam Speaker, will end up restricting growth and produce a loss of real income. This will go on as long as certain sectors of the economy is protected. The argument that protection will protect jobs is not supported by empirical literature. Some of you might, on the government side, read some of the papers of my honorable colleague, Dr. Mahendra Reddy, on this argument. In fact, empirical evidence from around the world argues to the contrary. While costs such as job losses are likely from import competition, the solution to this is not trade restriction, but our policy adjustment. Cost of living, Madam Speaker. Since 2006, food prices have increased by about 59%. Heating and lighting has increased by 60%. Transportation has gone up by 50%. Between 2006 and 2012 alone, food prices went up by 54%, while non-food prices increased by 32%. This has left most households in very real terms. In particular, households have been affected because while the cost of living rose, income wages have not kept pace with most sectors across the economy. The sharp rise in food prices has disproportionately impacted the poor, as poor households spend a large proportion of the household budget on food. The government has always quickly jumped to the conclusion that VAT is zero rated on basic food items. It is true that VAT is zero rated on tinned fish, flour, chaff, powdered milk, edible oil, rice and tea. I challenge the Minister of Finance to show this to this House that his policy has actually worked in keeping down prices for these products between 2006 and 2014, and the evidence suggests that it has not. He has not been able to keep the prices down. Or have retailers taken advantage of the zero rating to still increase prices and profits, as the Minister of Finance himself admitted at the budget forum. Madam Speaker, more importantly, a typical poor household does not only consume these items. A typical basket for any poor household also includes the electricity bill, water bill, mobile phone recharge, frozen meat, bread, processed food, transportation, entertainment. Further, even the poor and the middle class now consume more fresh meat, products such as chicken, sausages, fish and goat, which have all increased in prices. The poor simply consume less meat, enhance protein intakes, or consume far more unhealthy meat cuts, which are high in fat and hence extremely bad for the health. Madam Speaker, poverty and social sectors. The 2002-2003 household income expenditure survey showed that 35% of the population lived in income poverty. The 2002-2003 survey also showed that 40% of the population in rural areas were in income poverty. This proportion of people living in poverty in rural areas has increased to 43% in the 2008-2009 survey. By 2008-2009, the overall rate of poverty recorded a slight decrease to 31%, particularly due to a decline in urban poverty. Despite this increase, it still remains clear that almost a third of our population live below the poverty line. This is a serious economic issue and needs to be encompassed in any agenda towards greater and inclusive economic growth. I understand, Madam Speaker, that the most recent household income expenditure survey is being analyzed now. When looking at the per capita GDP growth rates, I can say that poverty would still be over 30%. Madam Speaker, in the last 5 years, the interim regime, when there was economic stagnation and freezing of nominal incomes and a decline in employment, real incomes of our people may have declined as much as by 30% because of the continued increase in cost of living. Poverty remains high because unemployment rates have been high, and the country's low economic growth has been ineffective in reducing poverty, although we expect some improvements these last 3 years based on the moderate economic growth and high infrastructure spending. Fiji needs high inclusive growth that translates into more employment, higher earnings, and increased family incomes. Only such changes can make any significant dent on poverty by improving the living standards of the poor and middle class. Education and health. We wholeheartedly support, Madam Speaker, the continuation of the increase in spending on health and education. We support free education, including for preschool. We also support the Ministry's plan to provide flexibility in the use of grants in schools and address student-to-teachers ratio and additional teachers. However, let me once again implore on the Honourable Minister for Education to set up an independent education commission to look at the whole education system. The Minister of Education announced in his maiden speech that there is, in fact, the Honourable Minister of Education, Madam Speaker, announced in his maiden speech that he will set up an education commission. But I see no mention of it in the budget speech. We have had so many changes over the last 2 to 3 decades that educationally we have gone this way, we have gone that way, often reversing policy, so that today we really don't know where we are. An independent and expert commission should be able to provide recommendations for change which should be sustainable. The last one was set up in 2000, but because of the coup, the commission did not complete its full report. I'm also surprised, Madam Speaker, that University of Fiji had its allocation reduced by $1 million. It is unclear what the basis for this was. The University of Fiji is a great example of a display of community spirit by a committed group of people to provide choice for students wanting to pursue higher education. There are so many locations which we can point out in this budget that are not a priority and wastage of taxpayer funds. We ask the government to restore the grant to the same level as 2014, and if possible increase it to 4.5 million. Perhaps we can reduce the infrastructure budget by 2 million. And I'm sure the Honourable Minister for Infrastructure will not mind, as he is well aware that they cannot spend it all in 2015. If they're doing efficiently and wisely. Health, Madam Speaker, We support the increased allocation and the plan by the Health Ministry to recruit more doctors and nurses to provide better services to our people. However, there are several questions that arise from the plans for the Health Ministry in 2015 for the recruitment of 150 additional doctors next year. What plans has government got to recruit all of them? It is our understanding that only 75 local graduates come out every year. Where will the other 75 come from? Will graduating standards be reduced so as to increase the number of graduates? Will they be recruited from overseas? If so, when is that expected to take effect so that the new year has the full complement of 150 new doctors by January 1? As the Minister himself admitted, the real issue is the quality of service delivery. And I hope the public service reform will address some of the staffing issues within the Ministry of Health, including allied health workers. Madam Speaker, the 8 million allocation for free drugs for households is welcome, but consequently also raises a lot of questions on the logistics of implementation, especially with regard to the income threshold requirements. Government has not come out with any clear plan. First, we understand that all current pharmaceutical supply in the public hospitals are already free. And those available in pharmacies, 74 of them are under price control. It appears that the public availability of medicine has spiked, and the government should first relook at this before it decides on this scheme. With respect to the 8 million free medication, how will government determine the $20,000 threshold? How is this to be monitored? Will the free medicine be available at all pharmacies? Or are only some favored ones likely to get the nod? We suggest that government appoint a holistic expert committee to seriously look at how this $8 million free medicine is distributed. This 8 million allocation must reach the people for whom it was intended, and we will vigilantly monitor from this side of the House to see that it is done. With respect to Millennium Development Goals 4 and 5, Fiji seems to have made good progress, and that is commendable. But with respect to MPG 6 and the looming NCD crisis, there is room for improvement. 10 results, you can talk for yourself, Honorable Minister. MPG 6 and the looming NCD crisis, there is room for improvement. 10 rates as a result of NCD-related diseases such as diabetes, pressure, and heart attacks have shown significant increase over the last several years. Finally, Madam Speaker, our health budget of 2.7% of GDP and 8% of total expenditure is below the international benchmarks and in fact below most of the Pacific Island countries. We need to at least raise the expenditure to about 10% of the total expenditure. Of the $47 million increase in the health budget for 2015, Hon Dr. about 17 million goes to capital expenditure and only 16 million for operational expenditure. I hope the Honorable Minister for Health knows this. This is inadequate for the ministry if it is seriously considering improving health services at all levels. The government should seriously consider additional allocations to operational expenditure, specifically targeted to improving services at our public hospitals, reducing waiting time, improve doctor and nurse availability after hours, which is a major concern for our people in this country. Major concern. Economic sectors, Madam Speaker. But let me start with sugar. The government has once again congratulated itself for an increase in sugarcane production by 12% just between 2013 and 2014. They just look at 1 year, there's an increase, congratulate ourselves, we've done very well. That is understandable. But they are not telling us that the number of active growers has declined from 13,000, to 13,000 from more than 16,000 in 2011. They are not telling us that the cane production has declined by 50% since 2006. Madam Speaker, the truth is that the sugar industry, which is still still very important for Fiji, seems to be on a permanent decline. Farmers have lost confidence in the industry, and unless there is a major injection into the industry to restore that confidence, I am afraid that the sugar industry will be dead and buried in the next 5 to 7 years. An allocation of 9.7 million for our industry, less than the 12 million allocated for the Natnula Gulf Tournament, is not going to remove the binding constraints currently facing the industry. Let's be serious. Madam Speaker, farmers have been shortchanged over the last several years. While they have received the share of the sale of molasses, they have not received the share of the electricity cogeneration undertaken by FSC. We suggest that FSC immediately rectify this and pay the farmers the arrears of the shares that they have not been paid. This could, to some extent, restore the confidence in the industry. And there are several other possibilities, Madam Speaker, throughout the world which shows that sugar industry can be developed further, improve incomes of farmers by high value byproducts, which should be seriously considered by the government. Tourism, Madam Speaker, is a key sector for our economy and will remain so in the future. But what is there that is holding back the tourism industry? What is stopping us to get 1 million tourists to visit our shores? What we have talked about for many years, but we need to get 1 million tourists. We need simple answers to these questions. If we do a simple analysis, we find that the infrastructure is enough to get more than 1 million tourists in Fiji. There are enough rooms alone, I'm told, in Denmark to accommodate more than 1 million tourists. However, Madam Speaker, the total rooms available, even at 70% occupancy, is not utilized. Fiji Airways' decision to purchase the A330s does not justify the fact that it can be a major carrier of tourism to Fiji. Currently, 3 by A330, 242 seats per aircraft, amounts to 726 seats per day, and then 3 by 737 aircraft, 150 by 3, equates to 450 seats per day. The total available seats per day is 1,176. At 70% seat factor, we are looking at only 823 seats per day. Fiji Airways has 300,468 seats that is available to contribute. If Fiji Airways does trips twice daily to all destinations, it will still not come close to getting 70% of total inbound tourists. So it is, Madam Speaker, quite evident that Fiji Airways cannot be the sole contributor towards achieving 1 million tourists in the next 3 years. Partnerships with other airlines, new airlines is necessary for Fiji, and the government should consider this. Madam Speaker, let me say that I have serious doubts about the financial reports of the Fiji Airways showing significant profits. The financial report should be provided in full. Additionally, we note that in 3 years, we are in a stage of a third CEO, and the airline is now being run by expatriates when many local people are available to do those jobs. And may I add that there are people who can also be CEOs of the Fiji Airways. We welcome the allocation of $23.5 million towards tourism Fiji. However, we are concerned that tourism numbers have only grown by 43,000 visitors between 2009 and 2013. The record visitor arrival was achieved in 2011 of 675,050 visitors, still a long way to achieving 1 million tourists a year. There should be a total overhaul of tourism Fiji, because the best way to promote Fiji is to have our local people representing us in many of our marketing offices. With our last local CEO, for example, Joe Tuamuto, we are doing well. Since 2011, Tourism Fiji has seen 3 CEOs. And they are now looking for a 4th one. I'm told the acting one has resigned too. Government wants to promote Fiji products. Fiji itself is a Fijian product. We must promote Fiji with Fijians. I'm told that some expatriates representing us in our marketing office say Kula probably. Madam Speaker, in wrapping up, I wish to reflect. Madam Speaker, I'll give 30 seconds for government members to have a conversation. Madam Speaker, thank you. In wrapping up, I wish to reflect on the poignant remarks delivered by the Honorable Prime Minister during his maiden address, where he made reference to His Excellency the President's reminder of this chamber having borne witness to some of the greatest moments in our history and also some of the worst. I too share His Excellency's observation on the symbolism of the highest court of the land pertaining to this very chamber. I also share the Prime Minister's view of the need to work together to achieve a future that our people deserve. He can count on the opposition to do exactly that and ensure that any legislation and policies that passes through us will be robustly debated, questioned, and to the best of our abilities, reflective of the good interest of the people. It is what we have been called to do. Madam Speaker, it was also reassuring to see the supplications of the esteemed government members of Parliament with hands outstretched from the other side of the chamber, beseeching us to work together. I totally agree with that sentiment. However, in moving forward, as seems to be the catchphrase of the government, let us never forget how we got here and the legacy of the past coups that our people who elected us continue to be held by. The coup culture must be purged, and the Honorable Prime Minister has an opportunity indeed to come full circle, right these wrongs, and truly, but not tokenistically, champion what is good for Fiji by convening a government of national unity. Madam Speaker, our people throughout Fiji are yearning for magnanimity, wisdom, statesmanship, moderation that bequeaths a way forward that binds, that unites, that leads, that compromises, and that heals. Madam Speaker, people are also looking at being freed from an environment of fear and vindictiveness. On vindictiveness, Madam Speaker, I have many examples. But one that I would like to raise in particular is the government's continued victimization of former Prime Minister Lasini Ngarase. He was promised by a letter, in December 2013 that his prime ministerial pension will be restored. But today, he is still waiting for it. Why? Why, Madam Speaker? This government currently wields absolute power and has created a culture of severity and psychophancy among civil servants, the media, the professionals in the private sector. In fact, never in the history of Fiji we've had such shocking levels of severity, psychophancy, and fear of those wielding government power. It is very depressing, Madam Speaker, to find people who are fearful of even shaking hands with an opposition member.
Madam Speaker, honorable member is going out of the context should have been budget debate, but he is bringing out other topics in his speech.
Honorable Prasad, I do agree with the sentiments being said. Please focus your presentation on the budget.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is very depressing, Madam Speaker, as I said, and this is in relation to the budget. People are fearful or even shaking hands with an opposition member to talk about this budget. I've taken it upon myself to assure many of them to shake hands quickly and move away unless they find themselves suddenly being considered 55 years of age and over. This is real. This is real. Madam Speaker, in a multiracial society such as ours, and the presence of a strong indigenous community, we must build a culture of respect, tolerance and inclusivity. We need inclusive and democratic institutions.
Point of order.
There are many...
A point of order was made. You had already asked the honourable member to committees to just leave his comment on the budget, but he has totally disregarded this, and he has continued on the line of speech reminded that once a decision has been made, he needs to abide by it. Thank you very much.
Please focus on the budget.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are many institutions that as a country we need to collectively relook at, economic and political. We need to honestly re-examine our constitution using a consensus approach, as was being done by the Guide Commission, which is the government itself appointed. We need to build trust in our rule of law, equality to all our society without bias. We need a vibrant, independent press and an active watchdog on government and opposition. We need respect for property rights for all our people and investors, both local and foreign. And above all, we need to remove all forms of intimidation and fear. We need a clear pathway and mechanism to do so. Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, a government of national unity comprising representation from all three parties can provide such pathway, which would moreover give confidence to our people and investors. All it needs is a firm first step from both sides of the House. Lest this be construed as me personally trying to get into government, let me assure people of this country that I am quite happy to continue to serve Fiji as a backbencher holding such a government of national unity to account as part of the opposition with other backbenchers drawn from all other parties. Madam Speaker, the winner-take-all concept of governance has and will result in bitter, acrimonious debates and finger pointing. Power sharing, as was espoused in the 1997 Constitution, in my view is the only way forward for the long-term peace, progress and stability of our country. For the first time in our history, there was a genuine power sharing in the form of a multi-party cabinet after May 2006 general election, but that was not to be. The establishment of the Constitutional Commission, which was one of the suggestions made by a member state on the United Nations Rights Council during the recent Universal Periodical Review, was shot down in Parliament yesterday by the Attorney General and Minister of Finance. He basically described it as the useless mechanism, saying the Constitution had its own review provisions such as the need for a 75% majority in Parliament and a similar majority of all registered voters.
He is trying to call what I said. Did I say it was a useless institution? I mainly talked about, Madam Speaker, about the recommendations that are made by individual member states and what it means. And I said that in this case, the Commission is not applicable. It's very simple as that. Please, if honourable members are going to quote another member, then quote it quietly. That's all.
Thank you. There have been three points of order already done. Please.
Madam Speaker, the 1990 Constitution had similar tight review provisions. But even under that Constitution, the leaders of political parties and members of Parliament were able to walk through it and have it reviewed. Madam Speaker, let me conclude. Let me conclude.
Madam Speaker, the honourable member, I think, should abide by the ruling once taken on the subject of the debate image, as opposed to bragging about the Constitution.
Sorry, Honourable, but I didn't get the last bit of what you said.
Madam Speaker, I rise to make a point of order. I think a ruling has been made for the honorable member to stay on the subject of debate as opposed to dwelling on other subjects, including the Constitution.
There is another point of order. If honorable member wants to address you, he should stand up.
I will
address you. He should.
I agree.
Thank you. Please, please respect the rules of Parliament. And I will expect anyone addressing me as a speaker to stand up and speak. But the Honourable Biman Kumar, already there have been 3-4 points of order on your presentation that you are diverting from the budget. And let this be the last warning, otherwise I might be forced to use my authority to stop your presentation. Please focus on the point.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm about to finish. Madam Speaker, the Constitution is always the foundation of any economy, but I'm not going to go on this. Some of our government members might need to understand it better. But let me say, Madam Speaker, there are several good policies in health and education and infrastructure that we support, but there are serious shortcomings in the budget and some of the policies based on which the opposition is unable to support this budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.